on Stories of Change. So this feels a little bit different to normal. The seminar series Stories of Change has been something that we've done over a number of weeks to just talk to people about what difference being a Christian makes to them and what difference following Jesus has made in their life. So I'm really delighted to be talking to Keith today. Many of you will know Keith, of course, unless you're watching this from outside our congregation. But we're going to spend so about 25 minutes just chatting through Keith's story. And we very much approach these as a sort of an opportunity to listen in on a conversation. And so that's what we're kind of inviting you to do if you're watching this now. So Keith, so just fill us in. So for anybody who doesn't know you or doesn't know you very well, just the real, bare basics of who you are at the moment, who you're married to, where you live, what you do, just very, very briefly.
Yeah, no, thank you, Kate. Can I, just before I start that, just to say that although this is a story read out by me, or at least understood as being part of my life, I want to say that it's really God's story as he's changed me, as he's worked in my life. So it's a story of change through God's handiwork and through his involvement in my life. So it might sound a little bit like me all the time, but I'm hoping and praying that it'll be God speaking through me and sharing a bit of my life. Yeah. Well, most of you will know that I'm not from this county. Leicestershire. No, you gather that from my accent, which I don't seem to be able to get rid of very quickly. People say, no, don't bother. It's really nice. I like to hear a West Country accent. And very often my accent comes out more strongly, perhaps when I'm a little bit edgy, a little bit nervous, so it might well be really broad Devon accent. Although I was born in Somerset, and I'm 69, so that was 1951. I was born to a family down in Minehead in North Somerset, and I have one sister, Yvonne, who still lives down in the southwest. As my story unfolds, you'll realise that we didn't actually stay in Somerset. We moved to Devon through my father's work when I was about 5 years old. So I was born into a loving family, and I'm really grateful for my parents having brought me up, to respect life, to respect other people, to love one another, to do good things as it pans out. My sister and I were taken along to church, but I'm not sure that either of my parents were really born-again Christians. I don't think they had a genuine knowledge and genuine conviction at all that it was a life of faith. It was a life of convincing oneself of Christ's dying on the cross for them.
Let me interrupt you a little bit there. So you grew up you were born in Minehead, and you grew up in Minehead. You stayed there for how long?
Yeah, 5 years. Yeah, just over 4 years. So,
and then you moved to Devon. So which town or village?
Yeah, we moved. My father moved for work purposes from Minehead, and we moved to Tiverton, which is just about 14 miles north of Exeter. So those of you that have driven down the M5 will know Tiverton. Which comes up, or at least if you've done it for holidays down into the southwest.
Yes.
You know it well, yeah. Small market town is Tiverton, although it's expanded in the last 25, 30 years. Quite a commuter now to even London, Bristol and London.
Yeah, that's true. So you were saying that that church played a part in your childhood. So what sort of church? How often do you go? What were your memories?
Yeah, I don't remember an awful lot about it, Kate, to be honest, as a sort of 4 or 5 year old. But as we moved to Tiverton, I realised that my parents were church goers, and they would take me along and my sister along to the major Church of England festivals. And quite frequently I remember going along to church on a Sunday. But I think it was more of being taken rather than understanding exactly why it is that I was going. So from that, I think I would have automatically gotten involved with things like an Anglican church choir. I was serving then at communion. I was confirmed in the Church of England. All these sorts of things that seemed to be just a natural progression. I belonged to a youth club. but I never went to any sort of mission meetings or anything like that. So my understanding of a genuine Christian faith, I think, was really lacking.
Yeah. So how old were you when you got confirmed?
So I would have been about 14, something like that, I think. Yeah.
So if we could speak to the 14-year-old Keith, what would he say about what he was doing there, would you say?
I think I was just working through the system. I'm convinced, that was just the way of it, that the vicar at the time would have said, it's time, Keith, that you considered confirmation. Yeah. And I would have had some confirmation classes, and no doubt all sorts of things would have been presented to me. But I don't remember sort of asking questions about who was Jesus. Did he die for me? Do I need to seek forgiveness? And anything of that sort. It was just a matter of working through the routine of church life.
Yeah. And so as a sort of older teenager, did you sort of carry on going through, I guess, what feels like the motions for you a little bit? Did you sort of stay with?
Yes, yeah, I suppose so, right up until I was about 15 or 16, so not a lot older. And then I realised that church life wasn't for me. I moved away from that. I'd met some friends. They were actually twins, the two boys that moved into the area. And this is still when I was in Tiverton. And we decided we were going to join the Air Training Corps, okay. Which is sort of a branch of the Royal Air Force for cadets and young people. So I moved into the Air Training Corps and I loved it. It changed me. I'm quite an introvert sort of person, a shy sort of person, believe it or not. But joining that, my parents encouraged me into it because they thought perhaps this might make all the change in me. It might make the man of me even. And it did. I really enjoyed it. It was all sorts of things. Went away to camps and at RAF stations. We went shooting, we went flying, gliding, camping, and all sorts of things of that sort. And I grew through the Air Training Corps right up until I was about 24. So I was from a cadet at about 15 through to an officer in the Air Training Corps when I met Jenny. And that moves me into my next step, doesn't it?
It does. Well, just let's rewind slightly in terms of your education. So you obviously went through school up until what point, and then how did you make decisions about your...
Yeah, I suppose really that all developed from my schooling years were at a grammar school. So I moved into the Tiverton Grammar School, having passed 11 plus as it was then. Yeah. Then did my O-levels and so forth, again at the grammar school. And then I continued into A-levels, and I found at that stage that school was not for me. I couldn't see myself carrying on with A-levels. Things just went pear-shaped for me. I didn't like it. And there was nobody in our family that had gone to university, so there was no pressure on me. Yeah. Continuing that. When I was doing Saturday jobs in a retail outlet, people of my age and perhaps a little younger, FW Woolworths. Yeah. So I did a Saturday job with FW Woolworths and holidays, school holidays and so forth with them. And it turned out that was going to be a job for me. I was invited to join the store in Tiverton, and I then moved to places like Brixham in the southwest, and started a life of retail. And even that didn't work out. I think all the while I keep coming back, I think God was watching over me. God was having a plan and a purpose, and I was sort of trying to go my own sweet way. I thought perhaps the things that I was liking were the things that I was intended to do. My time down at Brixham was a bit of a disaster. I felt that I was abused and bullied by the manager there. It was really difficult life. Yeah. He eventually, it's a sad old story, which he was, unfortunately, he lost his job because of the bullying. And it wasn't just me, there were others. Yeah. So I got out of retail. My father was a bookkeeper, managing accounts and so forth for a building firm in Tiverton. And I found a sort of natural progression to move into something similar. Yeah. A job came up at a textile factory, John Heathcote and Company. Yeah. Those of you who are Leicester born will know of textiles, of course, and we had offices up here in Leicester, Heathcote Yarns and Fibres. So I was with John Heathcote and Company, who came from silk trade. They were primarily in silk manufacturing, but then they went into dyeing and finishing and all sorts of other things to do with cotton and the likes, and weaving.
Yeah.
And I stayed with John Heathcote for 15 years.
Yeah. Oh, so a good move. So you mentioned that you were an officer in the cadets, or sorry, cadet, and then through the system and into an officer, and you met Jenny. So tell us about meeting Jenny. How did that happen?
Yeah, that's a fairy tale thing, I think. I should say actually that I went into bookkeeping. I became an accountant, trained as an accountant with John Heathcote's down in Tiverton. And all the while I was still interested in cadets, I was still interested in camping, and went youth hosteling way up into Scotland. And I thought, oh, this is a big adventure, this is, people from down in the southwest never actually got beyond the likes of Bristol, far out as we went. But to go to Scotland was a real big adventure. So Jenny and I met on a youth hosteling holiday, and cut a long story short, she ended up having a minor road accident. Not her own fault. It was a passing caravan that just lost control to some extent, or at least the car driver lost control, and the caravan caught Jenny on the arm. She ended up having to go to Fort William for hospital treatment and the like. So where does that lead us? It leads me in being very chivalrous, carrying her rucksack, taking great pity on this poor girl who was now in bandage and sling and so forth. And on our way home from the holiday, we actually ended up on the same train. We exchanged youth hostel cards, exchanged addresses and so forth. And it was some little while after that we wrote, and then the rest is history. Jenny was up in Wellingborough. I was down in Tiverton still. Such a long old distance to travel. We decided perhaps we ought to make something more of this, and it was all love.
Story. So how old were you when you married Jenny, and how?
That was 1977, so I would have been 26. Yeah, okay. 26. So that's I don't know. People say that's quite young actually, but it is nowadays. But people back in my day, they got married a lot earlier than that.
Yeah, that's true. So you married in 76, and where did you decide to live, and what were you both doing? So you were accounting.
Yeah, Jenny moved from Wellingborough to come and live with me. She's a physiotherapist, or was a physiotherapist when we first met, and she got a job in a hospital down in Tiverton, a cottage hospital. And we lived in Tiverton, had our first child, Christopher. That was in 1981. Life was good. Didn't really need to make any changes. One of the important things that I should say is that once we were there in Tiverton, our church life was pretty weak. Although Jenny said to me at the time, she said, I can only marry a Christian.
Okay.
And I thought, that's okay, that's me. I'm a Christian, I'm not anything else. But that really meant something more than just...
What do you think she meant by that? Why did she phrase it that way, do you think?
Now I know, of course, that she really wanted to marry somebody who was a committed Christian, somebody who was born again, who knew Jesus as their Lord and Saviour, who had seen him, getting involved with her life. She belonged to the Christian Union at university and so forth, and had come to commit herself to the Lord, and knew that it was only right and proper that the man she married, or the person that she met and eventually married, would be the same. And that is something that we hold very dear to now, that people should seek out partners who are Christians. So at the time I thought, that's fine. But again, it was no more than words. I think, she would have said, that does mean a lot more, Keith, to you, than just saying I'm a Christian. What does that actually mean? God puts people in our way, and I think that's an important thing for me to say at this stage. And at the time that we were down in Tiverton, Jenny was working at the hospital there. She met up with the Baptist minister's wife, who was also a physiotherapist. Yeah. And long and the short, she invited us to a baptismal service.
Mhm.
And I believe all the while that people were praying for me. I believe people were saying, you know, Keith is saying these things, but he's not acting like it.
Mm.
Let's get him along to a baptismal service. So at the baptismal service, there were testimonies. I think there were 3 candidates at the time. There was a good preaching from the word, something that really struck my heart. And back in those days, and I'm not sure they do it quite so much these days, there was a call from the pulpit, you know, come forward, that anybody who's felt encouraged by what has been said or seen.
Yeah.
And I went forward.
Oh, okay.
And I was...
So had you expected to enjoy the service? Did you go along thinking that this might be something for me, or were you a bit kind of reluctant?
Sure. No, I had no idea at all what I was letting myself in for. That was the first time I'd been to a Baptist church.
Right.
I knew something about Church of England styles of service and, you know, the sort of procedures. Excuse me a minute. But a Baptist church, you know, that was something off-piste, as I say. Yeah. But yeah, it was really encouraging, and I felt the Lord speaking to me then. And I was nurtured and encouraged into the faith through the ministry, through the Baptist ministry.
Did you course, or did they sort of just, you know, kind of invite you to come along regularly? How did they sort of disciple you once you'd shown interest? And
Well, exactly that way. I was encouraged to go along to Bible studies, to be, you know, as a young Christian, and even though I was 27, 28, something like that now. As a young Christian, I was encouraged to go along to Bible studies, to join a sort of home fellowship group, to read my Bible, to pray.
Yeah.
And all of those things weren't alien to me, but somehow it all meant something more now. I was really touched in a special way. So I'm very grateful to God for putting those people in my way. I'm really grateful to Jenny.
Yeah.
You know, who encouraged me, who keeps on encouraging me, who was there all the time, enabling me to focus.
Yeah.
Folks, I'm grateful for the minister, his wife, and so forth. So life was good, you know. We enjoyed our life there in Tiverton in the Baptist church. Thought it was really really beneficial, and I became a deacon eventually. So we're going on now about 5 or 6 years.
Were your
parents, boys brigade as well? There was Jenny and I.
Were your parents still alive, and did they have any view on?
Yeah, my parents were both alive at the time. Even, you know, when I get on to the part where we moved here to Leicester, both my parents were still alive. Sympathetic, understanding, certainly didn't get in the way, but I think they found that it was a little bit way out. You know, that we weren't quite following the usual sorts of traditions, you know. This was a bit OTT, shall we say.
Yeah.
But I encouraged that, and I was really grateful to God that, you know, my father eventually went along to that Baptist church.
Yeah.
Yeah, he opened up. He was really quite challenged, and I think at the end of his life, you know, he was convinced that there was more to his Christian faith than what he had experienced so far.
Okay.
I thought that was a real spin-off from my life.
Yeah. So you were happy in Tiverton. You were married. You'd got a son at that stage. I know a daughter comes along a little bit later on. So how on earth have you ended up in Leicester? Tell us about that.
Yeah. Let's say that I was challenged by my brother-in-law and sister-in-law, Jenny's elder brother, John, and his wife, Helen, who live over in Shropshire. At the time, he belonged to Christian Medical Fellowship, CMF, and had seen an advertisement for UCCF, Universities and Colleges Christian Fellowship, and challenged me about where my faith was leading me. You know, was I being obedient to God's word? Was I being open to what God might be saying to us with regard to our future? And I suppose the answer to that was no. I hadn't even considered it. You know, life was very comfortable. We were in a decent job there in the factory. Jenny was in a decent job. Life was coming along. We'd got one child. We were hoping for a second child whilst we were down in Tiverton, but that didn't happen. Why change? Anyway, we thought, we'd pray about this. I would take some counselling from the ministry down in Tiverton and various friends. And they said, put some feelers out, try and test the situation. And we did, and we went to a number of Christian organisations to see if there was any opportunities there. Nothing came of it. But as I say, my brother-in-law, member of CMF at the time, had seen this advert for UCCF, and I thought I will apply, and did so. And I had a polite letter back to say that they didn't really want to recruit people from all down in the southwest, which was 180 odd miles away. They wanted to do something a little bit more local. And I can really understand that. After all, it's quite a cost to recruit people if you have to pay for their removal costs and the like. So it was all put on hold. I just, put it aside. I thought, well, that's all right. The doors have closed. The opportunity's gone away. But then it was a few months later, I think it was about 3 months later, I had another letter from UCCF saying, would you like to come up for an interview? Whoa! I was shocked, horrified. Apparently they had recruited somebody as accountant, but the guy just turned up and then decided he wasn't going to turn up the next day.
Oh dear.
I just wondered afterwards exactly what it was that was going on at UCCF. But I went up for an interview and I got the job.
Yeah.
That was 1984. So I was 33 now. And we moved the family up.
Yeah.
We're now suitably and very comfortably situated in the skirts of Leicester, South Wigston or South Leicester.
Yeah. So, okay, so you moved to Leicester and you're now working for a Christian organisation. So just talk to me about kind of just a couple of things that you feel God taught you in that experience of working for UCCF. They're sort of very well known, aren't they, in the Christian world as being, very influential. So what did you find about that time? Did it sort of impact you spiritually being part of that?
Sure. I don't think you can work for a Christian organisation without having it sort of have an effect on you in some way. But it wasn't so much the work as the people. Again, I was really, really grateful for the likes of Oliver Barclay, who was the General Secretary at the time. Many of you at Avenue will know Oliver Barclay, or know of him now, and Daisy. And then Robin Wells and Bob Horn, various Gen 6. And it was more than that. There were a lot of really good, gifted people who encouraged me in my quite fledgling faith still to understand, what it was I was doing, what sort of work I was involved with in student ministry. But remember, mine was primarily administration anyway, so we like to think ourselves as being the engine room from administration, but we knew that we weren't at the coalface, shall we say. But the opportunities to pray together, to pastor each other well in that sort of environment was really brilliant. Really brilliant. It was also challenging as well because you felt that your life was very much under the microscope. So there were other people there who were not watching you to pick on you, but you felt, if discipline was needed, then we knew where it was going to come from. Discipline in the way in which you conducted yourself.
Right, yeah.
Accountability. And one thing that came out of that actually is that when we moved to Leicester, we continued in the Baptist tradition and joined the Baptist church, which, as it happened, turned out to be quite a liberal church, a really loving and faithful church, but it was primarily fixed on good works, primarily fixed on looking after the buildings and things like that. It was quite introvert in that respect. And I thought, in my sort of having one foot in the camp of an evangelical movement, that I would be able to encourage them to think more outwardly and to think more about ministry to the neighbourhood. It didn't work. And some 15 years we were with the church there. And it was quite painful.
Yeah.
God was teaching me here to be humble and loving towards those people, which I was, but I left under a bit of a cloud. It was very badly handled by myself,
Okay.
which I regret, and it was really quite painful for Jenny at the time.
Yeah.
And we were...
Where did you go when you left?
Well, we were at a bit of a loss, really. We thought, the natural place would have been to go to Knighton Evangelical Church, Knighton Free Church now. But that was where a lot of my work colleagues worshipped. And I felt that we didn't really want to be rubbing shoulders with the same guys that I was spending 5 days a week. So we went to OB Free for a little while. We went to Christ Church up on Queen's Road, Clarendon Park Road, for a little while. And then, because Jenny had been working here in Leicester, not as a physiotherapist, but working as the warden over at Muston Gardens, we had connections with Knighton. We knew that the plant was taking place at Avenue, or at least Jenny knew.
Yeah.
And by God's kind, generous intervention, we ended up at Avenue 15 years ago, that will be now, won't it? Yeah, 2005.
Yeah.
We were at a loss. We weren't actually going to end up in church on that particular Sunday, and we were encouraged to go along to Avenue, and we were there on your first Sunday.
Oh, you remember?
And that was really good. That was really good, and great to find a great and loving fellowship. And I have to say, and I'm going to say it now, the general public of Avenue and anybody else who's listening in, what a great welcome we had, despite the fact that it was your first Sunday and everything was new and everything was strange. People sat with us, people talked with us, and I hadn't experienced that much, even in the Baptist church down in the southwest. It was quite a challenge to feel that you would belong to a a
Yeah. Oh, so, that's really encouraging.
So we stuck.
Experience. Okay, so in the period that you've been sort of living in Leicester and I guess even since coming to Avenue and sort of if you think about it in the whole, do you think you could sort of give us a couple of ways in which sort of things God's taught you, or some challenges that you've had, or something, just give us 2 or 3 things that you think have sort of been really significant spiritually for you?
Yes, yeah. Some of it is quite recent, and I think I'll deal with the recent first so as I can get these books off my desk that I wanted to show, because I've been quite challenged by this book, You Can Change, by Tim Chester. I don't know if that's showing on the camera the right way around or whether it's in mirror form. Yeah, this book is about hope in Jesus, hope for forgiveness, hope for true and lasting change. God promises liberating grace and transforming power to his people. So a really great book. And that has been part of our studies in team meetings. I think it was back in 2003 or 2013, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
As a staff team, we studied that. And I found that a really encouraging book. And then more recently, we've been looking at home groups with real change. Yeah. All these things are saying to me, God has started that process in my life. Way back there in my Tiverton days when I met Jenny, life in the Baptist church down there, and continued with that process of changing me into the person he wants me to be. And I still find it difficult. I still find that I'm a bit of a control freak. I want to do things my way, and God corrects me and challenges me back to knowing him. And so I'm grateful for what Christ has done for me, for his death, his resurrection, for keeping me. The second thing really, which many of you will know, that I had heart bypass surgery, 2016, so 4 years ago now, in the August. And that was scary. That was a real fright for us both at the time, because it came out of the blue. I was quite well. I had no idea that I needed heart surgery. And so in 2016, that was diagnosed and had this operation, which was successful. But the thing that brought me really close to God was the fact that at the time I felt I needed somebody that I could talk to in the ward, in the hospital.
Yeah.
And God brought me a dear friend, a dear Christian friend. He and his wife came in. We'd had similar operations, we just were able to relate well, and it so lifted me.
Yeah.
And they're still friends of ours, which is brilliant. Churchgoers, great encouragers. So God sort of teaches you in all sorts of different ways to continue to trust him, and then he will provide for you. He will help you. I had one incident which I'll share with everybody now. As I was convalescing and needing to get my strength back, walking around the hospital corridors very early in the morning. This was 4:30 or 5 o'clock. I just needed to get out and walk around. So struggling up and down the corridors, I managed to look out the windows, and the sun was rising.
Yeah.
And it was such a brilliant, and you will have seen sunrises, you will have seen sunsets, and realised, just what a wonderful experience that is. But this was special. It reminded me that God has me safe, that God has me in his comforting hands. He has control of my life. And he will rescue me. He has rescued me, and he will hold me close.
Yeah. Oh, that's wonderful. Thank you so much for telling us all of that. It's really, really interesting to hear it.
Can I end up with some verses from Isaiah?
Yeah, absolutely.
Is that all right? I don't know how much time.
Yeah, that's
all right. There are verses that were shared with me, and it was really amazing. Jenny put them on a. I don't know if anybody can see that. There's my children, and so forth. I put the words on the back of that. Do you not know? Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. He will not grow tired or weary, and his understanding no one can fathom. He gives strength to the weary and increases the power of the weak. Even youths grow tired and weary, and young men stumble and fall. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. God repeated those words to me through Richard, who came in to see me when I was recovering. And he said exactly the same verses. So I think that's what God was saying. I am with you, and I'll be with you in your weakness, in your strengths, in your times of feeling doubt and sorrow, in your times of joy. It's brilliant. Soar like eagles.
They're very moving words, aren't they?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Right, well, let me pray just to finish with. But thank you ever so much for telling us about. There's so much more we could maybe go into, but I'll leave that as an opportunity for people to get back together. That can be they can have some follow-up questions for you then. Right, let me pray.
Thank you.
Father, we thank you so much for this chance to talk together and to just hear about the way in which you've been moving in Keith and Jenny's lives. We thank you for meeting Keith where he was through that Baptist service back in Tiverton, and we thank you that you have been with him every step of the way ever since. We thank you that even facing an unexpected surgery and the kind of the worries and the doubts that would have raised, that Lord, you were with Keith and spoke to him in that sunrise and through the words of Isaiah. So we just really pray for your continued blessing on him and on Jenny, and we thank you so much for everything they bring to the life of our church community. In Jesus' name, amen.
Amen.